Okay, folks, you're on.
I'm sure.
So, first of all, I'd like to welcome the people who've been with me for, it's actually more than 2.5 years, believe it or not. Every first Sunday of the month, except for a few occasions where it didn't work. And then, of course, I want to welcome all the new ones to our little soiree, our philosophical soiree and whatever. Just to explain to you how it works. First of all, I'd like you to have your cameras on. It's more sociable, etc. And usually I give a little chat to introduce things. I go quite wide, throw out. Can somebody please, whoever's talking, please stop. Oh, they don't know they're talking, but I can't. Okay. So I sort of talk for as little as I possibly can, which is difficult because I have a lot to say. And I usually don't say everything I want to say, but it's quite wide. Some of it will interest you, some of it will not. But in any case, the whole point is that for you to pick up things and run with them. And the advantage of so many people from so many different countries is that we come from different perspectives and different disciplines. And so we mix all that together and we get something out of it. So what we basically try and while I speak, please wait. If you've got anything exciting to say, I'll give you a chance, don't worry. So what we do is we discuss ideas here to explore possibilities, to test limits, to move beyond the functional and utilitarian, and hopefully into the realm of the unexpected and sometimes inappropriate. New ideas play with old ideas. We try to be flexible and creative, to be critical, and to not just accept things as they are. You certainly won't accept many of the things that I say, which is absolutely fine. As we discuss things together, we'll hope we'll start to understand them in new ways. Often, we even transform that something into something new, the result of thinking outside the box. Just to quote Yuval Noah Harari, questions you cannot answer are usually far better for you than answers you cannot question. You have to think about that, but you don't have to, because long before Voltaire said, judge a man by his questions rather than by his answers. So we hear and use phrases because, well, others do. They sound reasonable, true even. But I have for a while wondered about the phrase thinking outside the box. It sort of worries me. Is thinking outside the box a metaphor? I presume it is. Although I'm not sure. I think that people actually do think that there's a box that they can get out of. But whose box? A general, a common box, one's own box? Thinking about boxes as metaphors means that there are no real boxes, just as subatomic particles are not dots or points. We need to imagine something that makes sense, even though particles are not dots and not points, and boxes are not boxes. When we think of, for example, those who know about it, pilot wave theory, which is roughly matter is particles guided by waves, we have a picture in our minds of what we cannot picture. So I'm going to use a metaphor in order to concretize thoughts and make them manageable. The notion thinking out of the box presents a dissonance, being part of a human trait, which was introduced by me in my last book as the dissonance, fragmentation, approximation principle. Carl Sagan said, the universe is not required to be in perfect harmony with human ambition. The dissonance is wanting to be part of the box that humans are in against the lure of breaking out of the box. So boxes can be there in order to break out of, or they can be boxes that hold us in. Those of you might remember the song Little Boxes that was sung by Pete Seeger and Nina and Frederick. Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes on the hillside. little boxes all the same. There's a pink one and a green one, a blue one and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-taxi and they all look the same. And the people in the houses all went to the university where they all put in boxes and they came out all the same. And there's doctors and lawyers and business executives and they all made out of ticky-tacky and they all look just the same. That's the end of this night's entertainment. Now for serious stuff. But that's not what we think about when we talk about thinking out of the box. It is a sort of freedom. It's being different. It's making a breakthrough, literally. But are we free then? Are we not in another box? Somebody told me that they live outside the box. Which box are they living outside of? They mean living differently from those around them. But wouldn't that be living within their own box? The box each of us is in contains us and everything that makes us us, and only us. It contains our memories, experiences, perceptions, influences, social connections, and all the rest. And it also contains that which is real, which we can't imagine, as well as real that we can imagine. So we have colorless quantum fields that are really real, apparently, and colored roses, which are really red. The difference doesn't matter since they're all within our personal box. Therefore, no two boxes are the same. There is no objective reality existing independently of us, yet all of us, but all is part of a larger box called humanity that we can discern only from our own personal subjective box. This is somehow along the lines of set theory. We all got sets, and around us is a big set. So this is my question. Can we be outside the box? Can we even think outside the box? If so, the box must be temporary and is always temporary. The box is somehow part of the past as well as in the future, since we only know that we are out, i.e. that there is change, when we look back at the box we were in. A box cannot contain that which is beyond imagination. Can one think about things that can't be imagined, that one has never come across? Is it incremental? Do we increase our box bit by bit? How? Do the shoulders of giants get higher over time? The notion that progress comes from thinking outside the box is worth examining. For it assumed that one can think differently, that progress is a result of thinking differently. Is that possible? What does it even mean? Can one think differently from what one has already been thought? Surely we are bound by the limits of imagination, what has been thought of before, of knowledge. We could posit that there is no outside the box that is in your nature, that is your nature. How does one think outside one's nature? If one does so, then nothing is ever invented. Think of Plato and forms. Think of Kant's philosophy, which involved a radical shift in perspective, arguing that knowledge is not of things in themselves, but of how they appear to us through the lenses of our mental faculties. Does this make the rest of us unimportant in the scheme of things? Perhaps it does, since only a few people make extraordinary discoveries. Thomas Hume, in his The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, calls them paradigm shifts. We don't all manage to do that. Some of us do. Just let me have a little stop here. There are lots of people not on their cameras. Could you please put them on? Thank you very much. There are lots of you off. Thank you very much. Those of you who do that, I'm very, very obliged. It's much more sociable. It's nice to see everybody. Very nice indeed. Welcome, Frank, and people I don't know. Thank you very much. Lovely. Okay. All of so-called original thought seems to be out of the box, anyway, out of the current general box, but came from within personal boxes, all the way back to Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato. In Plato's The Republic, The pursuit of the truth becomes the aim of the state, which is superior to the humans who make up society, and the head of state demands total obedience and submission and decides what is truth. This led to Western Christian theology to insist that there was only one way of believing in truth. That was a tightly closed box, and one had to convert the rest of the world to it by force if necessary, so pushing everyone into the same box. But then nationalism emerged that imposed its dogmas on all its citizens to another box. Hegel, where is he? I'm bound to mention him. Hegel thought he could get everyone out of the box by claiming that the world was progressing inexorably to a state of perfection by eliminating anything that stood in the way. Progression through the boxes till the state of perfection, in other words, which was another box as impossible, perhaps more so, as the others. This inspired Nazis who took over Germany to murder anyone they did not want in their box, gradually widening the box to include much of Europe and purifying the box, something that communism took up with just as much enthusiasm. The antidote was to open minds to the nuances and challenges of an intellectual open market of rival ideas. But open minds just created even more boxes. Karl Popper warned that unlimited tolerance could lead to the disappearance of tolerance. Way ahead of his time, Popper also argued that democracy could not survive if it doesn't place effective control on television and the media to reduce the unlimited power that they exert today in shaping our cultural and moral environment. Popper, in fact, wanted to close that box. Isaiah Berlin despised the idea of absolute certainties, as he said, "If you ever come across a person who tells you that he is the sole possession of the truth, run away as fast as you can." Wittgenstein challenged the basic assumption of philosophy's claim to be able to solve moral problems. He emphasized language, using the phrase that the meaning of a word is its use. To ensure that since we communicate ideas using words, we have to make sure that we are using words in the same way. But how can we communicate ideas if we do not agree on what words mean? What do we mean when we say something is good? Good for whom? Much of the time, we talk across each other, but most of the time we don't. But words aren't closed boxes. Words have disparate meanings and nuances. They are porous boxes that we use successfully because they are approximate. Just to get to art for a second, artists have continuously thought out of the box. Expressionism, impressionism, Fauvism, constructivism, cubism, dadaism, surrealism, all boxes. But think of Picasso and Cubism. Did he think outside of the box, or did he express that which was in his box? Salvador Dali the same in surrealism. For the ultimate in art in the 1950s and 1960s, art was an attempt to reduce it to the box itself. Yves Klein and his Le Vide, the void, an empty exhibition, just four walls. His getting out of the box was a box. And music, what makes a musician successful and another one, possibly as talented, not successful? Does the former think out of the box? Nothing comes from nothing. I posit there isn't anything outside the boxes, in that knowledge itself is a series of boxes. Outside the box is a continuation of what is and was in the box. Thinking outside the box is a metaphor that allows us an insight as to how knowledge is expanded. How do we get more knowledge? People have been thinking about this for ages. How does it expand? How do we get more? Well, here's an answer. Knowledge is never new. It's always based on what came before. We stand on the shoulders of giants. Think of knowledge expanding, moving from one box to another. Boxes are porous. To paraphrase Leonard Cohen, let the light get in. Knowledge always comes from existing knowledge, even when it needs to be destroyed, i.e. found to be wrong. How am I doing? Not bad. On the ruins of what had been thought of to have been correct, we build a new set of knowledge. But as we build on top of what had been is never fully destroyed, but continues as the basis of the new. So boxes are never destroyed. Memories are boxes we have moved out of. The box we are in, we think we're in, is what we consider to be now. But boxes aren't static because they aren't closed. We are always moving to the next box, the next bit of what we know. The mystery of how we gain knowledge is not such a mystery if we think of it as a continuum that consists of metaphorical porous boxes. So thinking out of the box is usually a timeline along which we move. We never think out of the box in the present, yet we always do. We can't get to the next box without passing through previous ones that affect it. Like the Theseus ship, which was rebuilt over and over. Its spirit is never lost. Knowledge is never lost, remaining as it does as a remnant within the latest knowledge. Knowledge contains the memory of past knowledges. Boxes retain the memory of those that came before. You will notice that there are no gaps between the boxes. If there was a gap, there would be a place of no knowledge, and then there would be knowledge coming not from previous knowledge, but from nothing. Boxes are within boxes. However much you widen the box, you're always within it. My point is that we can never get out of our box. We cannot step out of a box without immediately creating another one. Actually, it's stepping into a box that is already there, i.e. we are creating a future that is potential. It is potentially there. Now, since, gosh, there are a lot of people without cameras, videos. Could you please put them on, everybody? Please. Look, I'm asking so nicely. Okay, Terry, this is for you. AI, I will always say it, Terry, always, because you're here. So AI is necessarily a system that is linked to what came before. Chat GPT that everybody's talking about now works by completing sentences based on words that we type in, based on millions of documents on the internet. It seems that AI isn't more open than human intelligence. Perhaps less open? I'm glad you're nodding, Terry. So one can ask, will anything happen that has never happened before? Had anything happened that had never happened before? Is that possible? No, since everything has a cause, or at least a link with everything else. Flat TV screens were a wonder when they came out, but they were just a development of those thick, great boxes that we used to look at. Knowledge is within a continuum of memory. Then we have to look at invention versus discovery. Imagination is restricted to the extent of our previous perceptions and experiences, Hume said. Let us chase our imagination to the heavens or to the utmost limits of the universe. We never really advance a step beyond ourselves, Hume wrote. What we invent is based on our imagination. In that sense, invention is the child of our imagination. There is no gap and no space between them. There is nothing that we don't know about. That will shock you. In other words, we can't know what we don't know. Although, before you say it, we know that there are things we don't know, but we don't know what they are. We only know after we know what we hadn't known, which is retroactive knowledge, which adds a box that hadn't been there. This is a way of explaining retrocausality, the idea in quantum mechanics that the future can influence the past. In other words, it's the concept that events in the future can affect events in the past. I maintain that this does not happen only in quantum mechanics, but it occurs all the time with us, i.e. what happens affects our memory, affects our past. Since I posit that our past Memory is the past, is memory. The limits of imagination are the limits of what could happen physically. If imagination were unlimited, it would mean that everything was theoretically possible, and hence subjectivity would know no bounds. Infinity would not only be within the realms of knowledge, but it would also be a possibility. But infinity per se is a state we cannot get to. An infinite box is an incomprehensible non-state of affairs. That should tell us that infinity is impossible, since a non-box is nothing, i.e. the absence of everything, which makes no sense. Once we introduce infinity into any argument, anything not only is true, but will be true. It is the ultimate scam of science, or rather of scientists who use infinity to make the point that anything will happen given enough time. Infinity is at the same time the ultimate approximation, while also being non-approximate. Everything is approximate up to a state of infinity, at which time it can only be approximate again. Folks, we are stuck in our boxes, yet are constantly moving out of them, some people moving out of their boxes faster than others. Or perhaps we should think of them all moving forward together towards the probability of our future boxes. So we can only think out of the box when we stop thinking. And that's a rough thought. So, I did it. I did it within the time I allotted, which is remarkable. And so I leave the floor, I leave the floor open to you. I see hands up. And so let us begin. Thank you very much for listening to me. And now I will listen to you. And Josh, I can't see you walking, but I know you are. So, there you are. Okay, Josh.
There I am.
Okay.
Yeah. So first I wanted to say, I did a little searching online as to the origin of the expression thinking outside the box. And apparently it stems from a experiment by psychologist J.P. Guilford. So in the early 70s, he put together a puzzle called the 9-dot puzzle, in which subjects are supposed to act 9 dots using forced lines without lifting their pencils from the page. So the solution involves drawing lines that extend beyond the area to find the box. So literally, they have to go outside of the box in order to solve the puzzle. Yeah, I also wanted to say that the idea of boxes that enclose us, I mean, that implies a relationship. That gets into the relationship between parts and wholes, between categories and what they encompass. And it touches on notions in mathematics, like what you mentioned, set theory, for example. So, there are movements in philosophy that argue that the relationship between parts and wholes is not an inclusive one. It's not as if wholes contain their parts, but rather, and it's not even one of the Gestalt notion where the whole precedes the parts, but it's one that starts from the premise that difference precedes identity, that identity is derivative of difference, rather than the other way around. Because to assume that memory, our boxes enclose us through memory, and memory sort of is like conservation of energy, it's never destroyed, but simply added to, that's generated from the notion that identity is first, and difference, change, relation is built from out of identity. But if you start the other way around, if difference comes first, then we're enclosed by our boxes. The boxes themselves are relationships. They're differential relationships among people. So even within, which isn't to say that we obviously don't live within cultures in which there are shared ideas, but rather it doesn't, it suggests that the culture doesn't enclose us. Rather, each of us, as we participate in that culture, we change it in subtle ways. So it's always so cultures are always self-transforming, even during periods in which we're all in relative agreement. So that novelty is always at work there. And in fact, the creativity is not something that has to be added to the stasis of the boxes, the creativity is fundamental, it's primary. So memory cannot be veridical. Memory is itself a reconstruction, and it's a transformed reconstruction. When we remember, we're always remembering from the vantage of an experience which transforms the nature of that memory. So that's what I wanted to share. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Yes, I agree about that point about memory. I thought in the beginning you said it might be closed. I think memory is very open and it changes retrospectively by what we do now. We remember something different because what's been happening now, and therefore all our memories are different, and even two people who've been in the same place will remember it slightly differently. So yeah, memory is a very interesting thing. I didn't want to say that memory is not destroyed, because a lot of it is, and some of it comes back and some of it never comes back. So memory is very, very interesting as a box, but a very, very, very open box, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, thank you, Josh. And you must probably come back as you go around the trees. You'll come back for another question.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Alan. Thank you. Yes.
Yes. Just a comment on memory. I believe neurobiologists categorize memory in a number of different ways. You have working memory, short-term memory, demonstrative memory, long-term memory, and some of these are physiologically different. At any rate, what I was going to say was that I think I pretty strongly agree with you, Ron.
That's terrible.
That's terrible, yes. But I do take a different tact on the subject matter that you propose for today. You're emphasizing boxes. I would emphasize thinking, and what I'm thinking about is, well, actually, when I was thinking about your subject matter, I thought I went out on a walk and I started thinking about it, and I went into a kind of recursive cycle. I came up with some thoughts and I repeated them in my mind, and I wondered, I'm not ill. Why do I do that? And in thinking about it, I thought something like this, that thinking is conscious, and consciousness is something that is, I think, working memory. And working memory is very limited. Some people say you can hold like 4 items at a time. George Miller would say 7 plus or minus 2, etc. And so we have techniques such that we can get this limited resource to work for us. And one of the ways that we can instantiate our thoughts is to repeat them in a recursive cycle. And another way is to use paper and write them down. And another way is to discuss them socially. We use each other as kind of memory storage devices, and so that's one aspect of thinking that I was thinking about. Another take on what you're talking about, more on the nature of boxes and such, is and a personal anecdote, and that is that I have a hearing deficit, and when my daughter was growing up, I constantly told her that if I can't anticipate what you're going to say, I can't hear you. And so there's that, with regard to the social aspect, it's very important that we interface with each other, that we that what we do is we're kind of mixed together in anticipation and responding to those anticipations, etc. And the third thing I want to throw into the kitty is a kind of a counter position, maybe arguing that in the variance of what we understand, there is something new, that the box, there are different boxes. Peter Galliston wrote a tome on particle physics in the 20th century, image and logic. And toward the end of it, he made some observations that were more general. He came up with a concept which he called trading zones. When you do big science, it involves a lot of people. There may be 1,000 people working on this project. The different people have different expertise, work in different disciplines. They don't understand each other very well. And so Gallagher maintains that they develop a pidgin language in which they can communicate and cooperate with each other. And so, and he also argues that this pidgin language is the source of mutation. It's how you come up with new ideas. And so I guess, yeah, leave it there.
Thank you very much. I just want to say I use boxes for a particular reason. I don't. I wanted to show things that I can only show in words, and sometimes, and when you use words, it's difficult to get across what you mean unless people can picture them, and that's why I mentioned in quantum mechanics, people can picture a point. Particle is not a point. Yeah, we don't know what it is, but it's not a point. It's something else. So I thought I'm going to use something that we can see and we can use it. And I agree with you that boxes are very, very, very open indeed. And one meshes into the other one, etc. And then they mesh into the other ones, etc. That was my point of thinking out of the box. The actual thinking out of the box to me, as I said, is very problematic. I don't think we can as such. But you know, anyway, thank you very much, Adam. Yeah. Richard.
Oh, good evening.
Hello there.
I'm not actually sure. When one takes thinking outside the box, I think it's become a bit of a cliche, and is used by people like IBMers. And I think that then it becomes defined in various subgenres, if you like. And I'd prefer to think of it the way that you're talking about it, as one of Foucault's grills. We're all trapped in a cage, if you like. The box is the cage, and the cage is tied with our knowledge of language, the way we were brought up, how we were taught, all the ideas that have come into us, and to progress outside that. I mean, we're tied by conventions, we're tied, you go back to, even though you can think, you can read something and think, that's right, I'm going to change my thinking. But then if you don't continue with that thought, in a year's time or so, oh, perhaps you were raised as a conservative. And when you go to university, you become liberal and progressive. But then you go off and work. And 10 years later, or 20 years later, or 50 years later, you find that you're becoming conservative again because you're caught by the grill of your social background. And I think that to some extent, one's talking actually about, oh, look, poets and writers and artists have muses, which they don't put as actually them thinking outside the box. Inspiration comes down from the muse. And when it escapes you, you no longer get inspiration. I suspect actually It's actually the fact that it's not your conscious, it's your unconscious actually putting together a whole lot of the background, everything you've thought of maybe, and therefore pointing a way outside the grill you're in. That example that was given about the 9 dots, the 9 points, and the lines that join them together was actually an example for of spatial awareness, I think. And it was used at one time as a test to see if people would make astrophysicists, you know, along with an awful lot of others. It's a very different thing trying to think outside the box, if you like, trying to escape your own conventions, everything that holds you back. There was a theory, I put this forward way back when I was a student in an essay, probably because I'd been experimenting with LSD at the time, but I put forward the fact that we think in certain ways to protect ourselves, because when you were, you know, going around with lions and tigers chasing after you, if you concentrated on all the colors and the beautiful flowers and everything else, you were likely to be eaten. So therefore you had to be able to look straight ahead always and concentrate on problems and split things up so you were in the now. Whereas if you break away from the grill that holds you, you take too much in. Just occasionally, that there's something that happens to some people where they lose the borders between sound, taste, color, and the different senses. And just occasionally, I've been very mildly influenced by that, which is very interesting, but you wouldn't want to live like that all the time. There are people who do, because it really interrupts your ability to concentrate. And so I think that quite often the box that you're talking about is there for our protection. But on the other hand, you have to escape it sometimes to break through in various problems. But then it can be quite trivial too. I'll bring out an example that I remember from when I was young. I came back from work and the guy who was driving our tractor had got the tractor stuck. He had a heavy roller on the back and he'd gone over a wet marshy area and he was trying to dig it out, and he asked me to come and help him dig it out. And I came down and looked at him and I said, wouldn't it make sense? I'm not saying I'm brilliant. I mean, I think nearly everybody would, but he'd got so stuck in the idea of thinking of the tractor and the roller as being one thing that he was just trying to dig it out. And instead I got him to disconnect the roller, drive the tractor to a space which wasn't deep in the furrows, reconnect the roller, and then he was able to pull it out. In other words, he was trapped by his own thought. And I quite often find, now I'm getting older, that if I'm thinking on certain paths and I'm trying to solve a problem, the trouble is I can't see outside the paths that I've already gone, and I'll try and solve it with ideas I've already had. So really what one needs is this inspiration, this being able to draw on the subconscious, this being able to not be caught, but we're always going to be caught. Our thinking is defined by the language we've got, the mathematical knowledge we've got, if you like. I would say, although I'm possibly being unfair, I would say that like poets and writers, pure mathematicians are also inspired by a muse, but engineers only see in a practical way to solve a problem that's ahead of them. But I might be being unfair. Carpenters, who I have great respect for, probably don't need to think outside the box ever, but they can really concentrate on what they're doing. So therefore, I'm not sure. I do feel that thinking inside the box and outside the box is too confining. The metaphor is too small. It's become something that is used by different people from different backgrounds to mean different things, because the box is always prescribed by what area you're discussing. whereas a mental cage, if you like, that cages each person within their own background is possibly closer. On the other hand, it's a long time since I've read Foucault. You've probably read him more recently than I have.
Thank you very much, Richard. I'm not sure whether you consider a box to be a cage or not, because if it's a cage, that's problematic. Unless it's got bars that you can get
I always
yourself
imagine
through.
a cage to have a grill. After all, Foucault calls it a grill, doesn't he?
Yeah, but
So I always imagine it bars. So
yeah.
you can get out through the bars, but you're confined by them.
Yeah, one thing that has bothered me for years, and that's why possibly I'm worried about this business thinking out of the box. I very, very rarely see people changing their minds. It doesn't matter how brilliant my argument is, right? And I've got it all down, and I give my argument, and then I see, no, I mean, it was brilliant, right? But they didn't.
You're the same age as I am. When we were younger and we were in university, our minds did change sometimes. What I'm arguing is
we don't know
the
that.
problem is as you get older, the bars get more solid.
Well, you only know that afterwards. You don't know when you're young that you are changing. You only know it afterwards. You can talk about.
I knew when I stopped being conservative and moved
Ah,
to being anarchist.
yeah, but you didn't see it happening. You saw
Well,
that you had changed.
Yeah.
That's a very important point to me, anyway. But anyway, that's thank you very much, Richard. That's interesting. Claudio.
Yes, thank you. Yes. As you said earlier, Ron, that once you break out a box, you'll create a new box. Although the boxes can be different, the new box could be, for example, less oppressive than the previous one, and vice versa. There are now two very important historical events. I'll just give you an example of two events that are very, very important. One was, the World War II, and what would happen before that with Hitler. Now, Hitler, he wasn't your typical politician. We know that, and he was a rule breaker in every aspect of society, not just politics, culture, the economy, and even science and education. Like he dismantled rules and introduced new ones, even the new Nazi science, which was false. We all know that. And so he dismantled the Weimar Republic, which was, let's say, a democratic box, a political box. We had the parliament, and you had parties and politicians would serve a limited term. And he introduced dictatorship, which was a new box. So here's the danger when you try to go to the extreme, introduce a new box with new rules, and totally ignore the previous box with the established rules. So I believe you need a mixture of both the old rules and new rules, or a new way of thinking, combined with the old way of thinking. So you need a balance, because you know what Hitler did, the 6 million innocent lives that were lost, and the bloodshed that occurred in other nations too. And this new box was way more oppressive than the previous box. So another example, this one one that worked was the Protestant Reformation with Martin Luther. Martin Luther, another German figure, he also thought outside the box, because he introduced a new way of salvation, right? And the Bible was the authority and not the Pope, right? He introduced these 95 propositions, theses, that weakened the power of the Catholic Church. That was the previous box. The Catholic Church, which ruled for many centuries, right? Which controlled all aspects of society, including our thoughts. And you know what they did? The Inquisition would last also centuries. They burned heretics alive. The heretics who tried to think outside the box, they were punished for that. So we know how people react when people introduce changes. You know that human nature, they're very resistant to changes. However, the Protestant Reformation, which introduced this new box, introduced their own box, which with all their different denominations and the newfound freedoms for people. And you know what happens? There's a lot of disagreement, and people don't have that order that existed during the Middle Ages. They're more kind of like more on their own right now, and but this new box, this new religious box, however, most people would agree is less oppressive than the box, the religious box of the Middle Ages. However, this new box does have, like you use the word dissonance, because there's more freedom. You have more disorder. There's more dissonance. You have new religious cults that introduce their own new boxes, and they're very dangerous too. We know what religious cults can do, right? With their new boxes. So I just wanted to give those two examples. They're very important, those two historical events, and I introduced two figures, Hitler and Martin Luther, who thought outside the box. One was bad, right? The first one, Hitler, and the other one was good. A good example. Thank you.
The Catholics didn't think so about the second one, but that's something else. I have to disagree. I don't think any of them thought outside the box. Hitler did not think out of his box. He knew what he was doing. It was his box. The fact that it was a new box for other people is not really. I'm talking about that sort of by the way. But these people you mentioned did not break out of their boxes. They didn't. They knew what they were doing. They set it out. The box was there, and they went ahead. It is wrong to think that he did what he did because in order to break other boxes, which is true, but not his box. His box, and that's very, very important. That was part of what I was saying today. That if we think that people break out of their boxes, they don't. They might harm our boxes, but from their point of view, their box is solid. That's how I see breaking out of or thinking out of the box in any case. Thank you very much, Claudio. Olga, good to see you again.
Okay, hi. I probably need today leave a little bit early. And first, what I wanted to say, and usually you choose these subjects and that make people eager to talk. And when I see the line of these people who are eager to talk, I kind of give up. And usually
never give up, never
yes,
give up.
Okay, usually someone say something that close to what I wanted to say. And I'm grateful today to, unfortunately, I didn't notice the name, the person who said about this psychological experiment, when people should draw the line outside the box and then close something. And at that time, it was actually very popular. And there was a lot of articles about it in different magazines and journals. And usually how you create these subjects, it have some kind of, in some sense, semantic element that people start to argue about the meaning of the word, not the subject, but the meaning of the word in many cases. And in my sense, these also could be referred not as a box, but a frame of reference, what you're actually talking about. And there is frame of reference that usually changing. And when you create this frame of reference, when you have this field of vision that you see, that not usually, you have to put yourself in the center of this frame, then you can create it. Without it, it's impossible. So it has to be framed, and without being framed, it's not visible. If right now I'm in New York, but probably in Israel, it's also a lot of modern art exhibitions. And when you came to this exhibition, you, in many cases, general public don't understand even why it called art. Why it called I have to call it art because it's in art gallery, but it's not different from what I could do at my house. So right now we have this situation in art when anything being framed could be called art. You see, and that's from my point of view is and without frame you can make it visible, and it cannot even exist in the society or anywhere, or it just disappears in the noise. So to create something, you have to frame it or put, as you said, in the box. And that's just what I wanted to say, but I have a question to everyone. Is anyone going to, here, it seems like here should be a lot of people who are interested in the subject of time. So maybe someone is going to this conference in Yamaguchi, Japan this summer. I would, if someone going to this conference, please contact me because I'm going to, and I would love to know who else going, and they don't have yet programs, so I cannot see the names of people who is going there. But anyway, what I would like to say that it's usually you frame your your subjects is that way that anyone consider that they could say something, and it's like have connection to I could say almost anyone. Yet this is it's most interesting. It's very the like feature of your subjects. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, frames. Yeah. Okay. Boxes are frames. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Very interesting. Tony. Hi there.
Hi. Okay. A little anecdotal thing here. I remember in primary school in England, and a teacher said to me, oh, well, not to me, it was to the class, you have the right to question anything. And I will tell you that has profoundly been one of the core parts of my personality from then on, that one has the right to question anything. And I think thinking outside of the box, one is metaphorical, and it is, I think, thinking. It's not, and you don't have to think within a framework. I would say this, I graduated to become an iconoclast. My idea of being an iconoclast is a person who attacks cherished beliefs or institutional beliefs. And I think that's thinking outside of the box rather than accepting, okay, so for example, in science, we knew X, Y, and Z theory and it explained whatever. But if we don't think outside of the box, we'll always stay within the confines of what has been accepted, right? So I think it's predominantly a thought process rather than any form of, and yes, I can go to a new thought process. Yes, it might have been preceded by some other thoughts, but I've created a new thought. So that's just one thing, I think, with regards to thinking outside of the box. It's just thinking, and what I want to say, the more for example, growing up, I had difficulty reading, but I love superhero comics. And I got into science fiction. And what did I see? Most of the things that we have actually come to realize has come from science fiction or you know, superheroes, whatever. You know, you look at Star Trek and that flip phone type of thing, and we develop it. Whatever we perceive, we can conceive, I think. Whatever we perceive or conceive, whatever we think of, we can actually make. But if we limit our thoughts, then we'll never discover anything new. Well, I wouldn't say we'd never, but it would be very difficult. So I believe that it's really a thought process rather than anything else. And I just wanted to say, Ron, I taught many years, and I had colleagues who taught and they had syllabi and so forth. And yes, you have to keep to the syllabi and so forth. And I always thought they were so good, right? However, a lot of the students that I taught really showed appreciation. And why was that? One, I was able to enthuse them about, say, chemistry, and you know, and set the pathway, brush it so that they could trot on it, whatever. And also, I individualized the presentation to the student's need. So, for example, if you really want to change somebody's mind, you have to first of all, I think, no, this is just one strategy, understand what is blocking them from seeing what you clearly can see that they cannot see, right? And that is, and then if you can now package a something that can address what is their blockage, I think you can actually change minds, right? And I know over my lifespan, I've changed my mind so often because I'm open to ideas. So it is possible, I think. If not, it would be very sad. That's pretty much it.
Thank you very much. Tony, you left yourself open when you said that that you can you're entitled to question everything.
Yes.
So here's my question to you.
Right.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Can you give me an example of,
Mhm.
of any new piece of knowledge not connected to something that came before?
Okay. You just made a connection, which I think does not necessarily have to be made. So I invalidate in my own
Yes,
mind.
darling.
I'm sorry. I invalidate in my own mind that connection you've made. That because it is tied to previous knowledge, it is therefore not something new. And this is what comes with the challenging of things.
No,
I do not think that that's necessarily a absolute connection that has to be there. So I refute that connection.
I know. But I did make the connection. Is what I'm asking you.
But I'm disagreeing with that connection.
Okay.
Validity of the connection.
No, I understand.
Right.
But if you, but my whole thesis is based on something that's built on something else, and you're saying that you can have something that's not built on anything.
But I think your thesis is not correct. And if you're using that as
and I need an example.
No, but what I'm saying is that the end result you're saying is that if something went before, then something that comes afterwards is not unique because it was attached to something before. But that's not a real. I don't agree with that connection. It's like, for example, that's wrong. If we agree with that basis, then your premise is, what you're saying is right. But I don't agree with that connection. It doesn't mean that because, let's put it like this. I am the man that I am now because of all my experiences, but yet I am a different person than I was when I was 7 years old. Just because I went through that transition to this point doesn't mean that I'm not a different person. So have you ever listened to Terry Pratchett? I mean, I love Terry Pratchett, but
Yeah.
he makes those type of associations. I mean, love is authorship, but it's not necessarily correct. And also, we hear about all these, people who are really, they were philosophers and this, but what they were thinking doesn't have to be true. That it does not have to be. We have as much right, I believe, to come up with our own thoughts and so forth.
Of course.
Right. So this is where I said the iconoclastic thing, which started from about 7 years old when his teacher told me that you can challenge anything. I truly believe that, and that can set you free, right? But yes, the egg came before the chicken, right? But the chicken is a different thing than the egg. It's a brand new thing.
Well, okay. I have a feeling we're gonna carry this on later because we have to move on.
No problem.
But okay, thank you very much. Very
Thank you.
interesting. Thank you. Abraham, welcome to us.
Oh, thank you. I like, this time and space actually. Somebody asked me when did I learn English. If I'm in a good mood, usually I say this Monday. They laugh, really? So I usually reply, that's why I still have an accent. Learning language is my hobby. And I'm observing people from different nations. Anyhow, I'm here to learn and to also partake this zeal, I would say. So I remember a movie scene long time ago when I was younger. I'm still young, but the movie is like this. I'm paraphrasing a little, it's short. Tom is in mental hospital. So his friend, Paul, on Sunday, morning, decided to visit him. So he visited the mental hospital and talked with the doctor there, and they opened the door in mental hospital. And then there are a lot of people. So he recognized Tom. Tom was posing like this on a table, like this, very focused. So Paul and the doctor went to him and they said, how are you, Tom? He said, I'm fine. So the doctor supposed he's doing fishing because he's posing it like that on the table, like that. So how many fish did you catch, Tom? So Tom didn't say anything, very focused. So he asked one more time, hey, Tom, how many fish did you catch? So Tom looked at the doctor's eyes, straight eyes. Do you think I'm crazy?
Okay.
Yeah, I remember for some reason, maybe it was me at that time, who knows, somebody shoot me, the video. So I think Piaget talked about different stages of development. So from birth to 2 ages, sensory motor stage, there is a substage called object permanence. So baby always very early age, when something disappears, they cry. But at some point, if something disappears, they know they are inside this one or behind the box. So they can connect the dot. So I think when we think about the sanity, I would say in many ways, language, our visual ability, sound, sensory ability, we cannot handle all this continuity. It's too much as thinking about the human conditions. Being has a body, I would say. Mostly, I think to keep our sanity, I think we need to look at this direction, this angle, or sometimes a little depressed or thinking. Sometimes we can look around a little bit, this direction. But if someone walks like this, he's too free, he's in danger. Some of them might be in mental hospital, or government might think he It could be dangerous or subversive or grotesque. I think the platforms allowed is art and I would say comedians. Nowadays they are censored a lot, or some brilliant writers, but they usually encode, right? Like George Orwell, 1984. So I think the tolerance level depends on the times and given society. I think when we talk about think out of the box, I think it's someone mentioned better than me here. I think it depends on the context. I think we misuse this word a lot. There is good word we can use. I think creativity. I think out of the box can apply and use pretty well as a phrase. But are we ready? How much? I think we don't even want to change our soccer team, right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Thank you. Yeah, Bill.
Yes, I wanted to pick up what Olga had said, which I thought was very interesting, was the term that she used called frame. And as I sit here and listen to everybody, I have a sense that thinking outside the box is putting the box inside another frame. And I'm not trying to be cute with that, but it's finding a vocabulary from another discipline to describe the subject matter of the box that we just put in the frame. So we see that the idea of a event that happens in our presence is either part of a context, that's another frame to put it in, which takes us into the dynamics of force, environment, behavior, and begin to think in those terms. We can think about archetypes being expressed in an expression that is an artist's work. We can always find a frame to fit the box, or the box to fit in the frame. And it's an important way of seeing how we can be creative. I mean, I did for years practice law, and I think the idea of finding a new frame was exactly what we did when we created a legal defense. The idea that a claim happened or the injury occurred could be reframed as showing that the defendant was a bad guy or a good guy, or he did something beneficial, or he didn't intend it. And that's all framing change. And it's all about changing our understanding of the event. And that's putting our frame out there that's a discipline of law, that could be a discipline of behavior, it could be a discipline of science, it could be a discipline of biology, it could be a discipline of evolution, are all ways of seeing things differently than we do when we're in a tight argument with someone about something. So it's about how we reframe our behavior that is the source of creativity, it seems to me. And it's important for us to recognize that maybe there's a limit to the framing we can do, and that at some point we're going to come to a juncture where I can't frame anymore and have to recognize that my interest in evidence has come to an end, and I can't speculate about an event that happened somewhere else in someone else's imagination. So I think both framing is a limit, framing is a creative act, and framing is about changing our perception of what the box contains and how it works. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to make a point here, but you're talking about what we do, how we frame what's happening outside us.
Yes.
Right, because wherever you put the frame, that's what you relate to, according to what the frame. But I was talking as well about our own frame, whether we can move out of the box. We not what other people do to us, but what we can do. And that's I don't know if we can move our frames. We ourselves can move our personal frames for ourselves. I'm not sure we can do that.
I agree with you. I think as long as you continue framing, you can do it. But at some point you come to an end where you can't frame anymore and you hit the boundary of knowledge. In other words, if the frame is, I have knowledge of that I can perceive, and I come to a point where I can't perceive it, I can't rely on evidence anymore. I'm going into some interverbal metaphysical piece. I've come to an illegitimate point in my framing, and I can't go further. And I think that's the important lesson of framing, is that it has limits. And you can't find the vocabulary of a frame to work on fantasies as evidence and empirical fact, but people do that all the time. And so it's a question of limits of our cognitive ability as people who take evidence as a basis for what we know. And can we know what we can't perceive? I don't know. I don't think so. But it's a matter of a limited frame that I cannot get beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Very interesting. Michael, hi there.
Hi. Again, it's so rich topic, but just a couple of comments. First, Ron, I appreciate that you mentioned this retrocausality in quantum mechanics. And yes, from what we know about how our brains work, it seems very appropriate to how we are processing information. So absolutely, we always have the internal models of the future, and these models affect not only our memory and our perception of the past. And it is well-known phenomenon that people may have false memories. They may remember what did not really happen, but it even affects how we see things. So our visual perception, we see things as where they expected to be about a second in the future, not where they are now. Otherwise, if you say play tennis or something like this, you would never be able to catch the ball because your response time is not sufficient to process it in real time. So our brains are predicting this, and we are acting according to this prediction. So it's very similar to this quantum notion of retrocausality. Is it just an analogy or modern analogy? I don't know. But maybe there is only the limited number of ways to process the information, and maybe just our brains and the nature inventing the laws of quantum mechanics just reuse the same mechanism. One possibility. Then it seems that you take this notion of boxes too literally, because it's just a metaphor. And we can play with these metaphors in different ways, again, related to how our brains process information. To begin with, before you can think outside the box, you have to put something into this box. And in many cases, it just happens automatically, and we don't pay much attention to this. But the way how it happens, it affects very much how, again, we see and perceive the world. So there is a theory, well, it's not just a theory, it's actually it's the area of research which was developed for a number of years about how the anatomy of our brain, of organization, better to say, of our brain affects the perception. And the organization is its multi-layer hierarchical sort of layer after layer after layer, up to 10 layers of connected neurons, and a neuron from each layer has multiple connections to neurons of the lower layer. So it's basically what people are trying to do in deep learning. This algorithm, it's already innately like in our brain. But what is interesting is that how these connections are fired. They are fired just in temporal order of processing this information. So our primary perception is a temporal perception. And this is how we infer the cause and effect relationships from our experience. And the way how we perceive the spatial patterns, it's also based on this temporary information, temporary order, because we are just scanning the space in time. And this way we infer how these different areas in space are related to each other. So this is at very fundamental level. And this is how we frame our primary experiences. But this is automatic, but also when our system 2, when our rational processing is involved, we usually have to limit the problem, have to limit the area of our perception and to build a box, if you want, around this, in order just to focus on most relevant information. And again, for most people, most of the time, it happens automatically. We don't pay much attention to this. But some people have a problem with this, and it may result in some mental disorders and so on. So it's not trivial. It's only trivial because for most of us, it's a given. But then when we are talking, so another metaphor with these boxes is that if you are familiar with this Schrödinger's cat, the cat in a box, and you can only learn whether this cat is alive or dead only when you open this box. So this is sort of another quantum metaphor, which is probably related to how our brains operate. So we have so much knowledge accumulated in our connections, these neural connections and so on. And this knowledge is not active and it's not doing anything, maybe until it's connected to knowledge coming from other areas in our brain. So only when we open these boxes, then we are getting something. And we are getting something depending on how we. So I'm talking about this because I just finished a book by Sapolsky, Behave, which is a very thick book about this very topic, how our brains are processing the information and how it affects our behavior. So I'm still under impression of this book. But the same knowledge can be interpreted differently depending on how we connect this to other areas of our brain. So this is similar to this metaphor of Schrödinger's cat. So it can be alive and dead at the same time until we connect it to something else. And when we connect it to something else in quantum terminology, this decoherence happens, and then it falls into a well-defined state. And another metaphor around these boxes, so besides this box that exists in each of our brains, your brain is also a box. You only have limited knowledge, and this knowledge is encoded in certain neural pathways. And these pathways, of course, they are very dynamic, they are changing with time, but mostly they're changing when you acquire new knowledge. And if this is the high level knowledge, like theoretical knowledge, the way to acquire new knowledge is by talking to people or by communicating with other people, or by reading books written by other people. And so this way, when we are connecting our boxes, which is our brains, that's how we are opening these boxes. So we are creating this sort of larger box, or increasing, each of us is increasing our own box. But at the same way, another way to look to see this is that we collectively create some larger box, like meta box, if you want, that includes the collective experience of multiple people involved in this communication. So maybe people who have better ability to think outside the box, it's to some degree because of maybe some maybe more dynamic and flexible connections in their own brain, but the way to develop this more dynamic and flexible connections is through communication, through reading, through discussions, through all this what allows us to develop our creative abilities eventually. So just a few random thoughts.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I didn't want to say this, but when you mentioned, I'm sorry, but I've got to say it. I can't resist. I've written about this many times. The cat that's alive and dead is a load of rubbish. I'm putting it like gently, like that. A cat is not alive and dead at the same time. No matter what you say, if you want to open the box and see a live and dead cat, I will agree with you. But at no point do you ever see a cat that's alive and dead. The only thing that happens is that when you open the box, you can see whether it's alive or dead. And then you know what possibly happened, but that's it. And I don't, I know scientists don't like me to say this, but I think it's absolute nonsense that there's it was written as a joke for a start, to show to show that this doesn't happen with big things. There's no dead and alive cat, and I'm prepared to bet money on it. So that's all I have to say about that, because you forced me to mention it. I didn't want to mention it because that is a definite box, and the only time you know about it is when you open the box. And now, if Spirit Man, if you be really, really, really kind, but you don't have to, permission for me to move on to people who are new, have never spoken before. Is that all right with you?
Yeah. I just wanted to know that it's not about the cat. It was suggested as to show the silliness of Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics.
I know, but it's still.
But a quantum system that could kill a cat or not, it can be thought as in a mixed state according to this interpretation.
Well, it can be thought of, but it doesn't happen. I agree. I can think about it, but I can't see a live and dead cat even in my thoughts. But is that all right that I move on to others before? Thank you. Yes, Spirit Man, do you agree? Do I have your permission?
You want to skip me and then come around later, or
No. I just want to move. Yeah, stay where you are. Don't move, because then you'll move out of your box. Stay in your box for the time being. I want to move on to, if it's all right with you, to Kirk, because he's with us for the first time and he's been waiting a long time. Okay, Kirk, welcome to us.
Hi, Ron. Thank you.
Hi.
One thing I want to bring up is a thinker and an idea set I don't think has been brought up yet, and that's Thomas Kuhn and the paradigm shift.
Yeah, I mentioned
to
that.
me, yep. Did you?
Yeah.
Or did someone? Okay, I must have been out of the room. To me, a paradigm shift seems to be the old paradigm seems to be the old box. The new paradigm seems to be the new box. And it seems to me that it takes a creative act to get us from one paradigm to a new paradigm. Exactly what that creative act is a very open question for me. But as William was saying earlier, when we reach a limit, and the thing that came to my mind while we were listening to everyone was Einstein and his hesitation, I guess, in regards to quantum theory. I don't think it was a limit of his intellect. I think it was a limit of his box. I don't think he knew how to get beyond the relativity box into quantum physics. So I think when we reach limits, it's not so much that we can't go beyond them, but sometimes we don't know how to go beyond them. And that might be an emotional attachment or social attachment that's keeping us in the box. But I think that's one way we move beyond it, or not. Then just to move on, I have one quick question for you, Ron, in about your hypothesis. Do you think it invokes a first cause paradox? And if so, how do you deal with it? And if not, why not?
I definitely have a problem with first cause. I do have a problem. I don't know. I am one of the few people to say that I don't know. I don't know how we get to that, because I can't understand how there can be a first cause. If you're religious, then there's no problem. There's a first cause. If you're not, where does it come from? It doesn't come from anything because it's the first cause. Does it come from nothing? Nothing comes from nothing. So I don't know what to do with the first cause. It's a mystery to me.
Well, in relation to your hypothesis.
Can you spell that out? Oh,
Well, you were
how
saying that, like standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah. Where was the
That
first
every
giant?
Got you.
What I want to say.
You're asking where the first giant was.
Yeah, it's like you said, everything is built on something else. So that for the box that I shift to, the box that I have came from a previous box. That box came from a previous box. That box came from a previous box. That box seems to regress back to infinity, to the shoulders of giants before, and then the shoulders of the giants before them. So in that analogy, who's the first giant?
But nobody really deals with that. They pretend they do. Science pretends that the universe was created from, and they got a problem because then they got to say created from nothing. So they say, no, there are particles that pop in and out and it comes from there. But then they're not quite really happy with that. So they're talking about bouncing universes or eons or all sorts of things that came before. They don't get to the question, where was the first one? Because they'll always say there was one before. This universe goes back 13.8 billion years. And before that, there was another universe that went into our universe. And that does not answer the question. So if they can't answer it, I can't either. I'm just interested how they get away with not answering the question you just asked. Right? Because as I say, religion has no problem with that because the first cause is God. But on the other hand, you say, well, who created God? And they won't discuss that. That's it. So they've got it easier. They have a belief, but science has got a belief as well. Sorry, but they've got belief in these things that they can't test. They can do all sorts of mathematical things, but they can't test the universe that came before. So I have to say that I don't know, Kirk, and it's a very, very good question, and it definitely needs to be asked. But nobody's answered it. It's a problem, and you put your finger on it. It's a good one. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Spirit Man for another second so that I can be fair to
I can go at the end. That's okay.
Okay, thank you very much. It's up to you. George, welcome, and you're on, as it were. And then we're going to get, where's she gone? Vanya.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, George.
Yeah, I just got a question about the boxes. I truly believe that it's possible to think out of the box and to, you know, to think differently. So my question is, what is the best way to break the box, to break the box that I think, and build my own box, so I can think, you know, freely, differently.
What's your box built on? From what? Where's the material from your box?
Use, let's say, the negative thinking. My box was built on negative thinking.
What does that mean? Negative thinking?
Like the metaphor of life's like life was, you know, hard, you know, life is not a good place to live in, or something like that.
And those are the materials you build, but those materials you're thinking about, right?
Yeah.
That's the box you're building another box from. It has to be a box that doesn't exist, which means that you're completely blank in every way, which nobody is.
Yeah.
So I'm just you know, querying it. I understand the words that you're saying. I'm trying to understand how we can build a box from materials that we don't have. I'm sure Hegel will come in somewhere along here. I have the feeling, but but no, it's a very no. I understand what you're saying, and it's a good question. I'm just asking how. That's all. Thank you very much. That's it. That was your comment. Thank you very much. That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Welcome to us. I'm now going to go to Vanya, but she hasn't been before. And sorry for the wait. And it's your, say what you want to say.
All righty, no worries. I appreciate everybody, and I kind of agree with everyone on the same. I think that we all need some sort of a structure, and whether if it's a frame or if it's a box, I think that we at one point or another, we do skip one box or one frame to go to different scenarios in our lives. I do agree that it is almost, I will say, impossible to build up a box without the input or the output of others, because that's what we see, we hear, smell, or feel. And so we're going to react to that. Whether perception is going to be different, you know, depending on where you come from, your environment, or your own perception. You know, if you are blind, if you are deaf, if you are mute, you will have a different intake of that information. I will say that at some point in life, you come to a point in which you feel that your box might be full or might be empty, or may still have opportunity to be filled out in a different manner with different materials. I want to say that it is possible to be out of the box, but like you said, it has some sort of continuity. So it does come from somewhere else. But like people that has gone through certain trauma, certain situations that force them to get out of themselves and be in a different mode, I will say, you know, in a different reaction that is not common to the regular norm. I think that there is a possibility to change certain things, though it may not look from the outside as a brand new person. It will still have some sort of improvements. And I think in the improvement is the change. But that is my perspective on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I just want to say that out of interest, that it seems that everybody really wants to think out of the box and really don't want to hear that they can't. I find that very interesting. Actually,
me
Is there-
too. Because one way or another, we always have some sort of record that we want to either change on our lives and or morph in a different manner. Whether if it's because we never ask questions, or then we ask too many questions, or we just don't care about those questions, or we don't even see any reason to question. You know, there's so many things that, like, for example, my mom will say that I started walking without them helping me to learn how to walk. And in my mind now at 44, I'm thinking I knew that I needed to walk certain way because everybody was walking that way. You know, they were working in 2 feet, not in 4, you know. So we all learn that way, whether if it's language or art or creativity. We do have certain learning process, and it does get connected from point A to maybe points difference, you know, further than Z, of course, you know, but it is cause and effect, and then it just might have bounced in a different direction that had not been seen before, but it has been there, like you said. And then next thing you know is that you're like, maybe if I had seen it that way, I would have, you know, thought about that. You just did not know that you were actually very close to that angle. So I agree with everybody, actually. Very good points to everything on those boxes.
Thank you very much, Vanya.
Thank you.
Spirit man, let's have it.
I get to go first, or I get to go next? Okay.
Yep.
Well, Ron, you had to bring up Hegel, didn't you?
I had to. If you're here, I have to.
Well, I'll try and keep it short here because I agree with what was just said. Everybody said something amazing, actually. But if I could just ask everybody to suspend their boxes for a second to entertain this.
Exactly
this
what I said we can't do. You want us to do. Okay.
Try anyway, because this is kind of different. Maybe a little bit of different take from what people said earlier. So hopefully it contributes in some meaningful way. But basically, I think we need to return to the box that is real philosophy or genuine philosophy, what it's supposed to be in its own box. And in order to get there, we have to find the thing, the piece of knowledge that's not connected causally to any prior knowledge. And it's kind of by this negative thinking that was said earlier, but this time in the metaphysical Descartesian absolute way, where we arrive at the first true objective thought, which is called pure being. And in order to get here, though, I think the first box that has to be addressed is what you said, Ron, that the box analogy is really just a picture you're using to approximate something. And that's called picture thinking rather than universal thought. Just like how matter is not really a point, it's just a representation we're using to try and grasp this supersensuous type of box, you could say. But really, I think in the universal logic, it's really just limit we're talking about here. And when we're trying to think outside the box and we're getting into this cognitive dissonance, we're creating pigeon language, we're trying to force pictorial thinking, finite thinking, into the true philosophical knowledge, which is outside of these sensuous boxes. And I think, Ron, you did a fantastic job leading us into this paradox where, well, you know, we're getting out of a box just to get back into a new one. And that's absolutely, I think, correct. That's the true, genuinely philosophical way of thinking about knowledge, or true knowledge, or the truest knowledge we can have, seeing that we can't get out of absolute boxes. But really, we are just moving in and out of boxes as dialectical stages where the limit creates a beyond, which then reincorporates itself into another box that's more concrete. You know, our theories of quantum fields, colored roses, stuff like this, phenomenology versus matter, I think, is just Chalmers' neutral monism. I think the real way of looking at the world is really in this neutral monism, where you can look at it in different representations. And you're saying we can't have any boxes that are the same. They're all temporary as we're progressing somewhere. But that's only true in the bad infinite sense. There's a type of genuinely philosophical infinity that our pictorial conscious is not good at grasping in its universal sense, in the true sense of the infinite. And that's more like a circle or a box that circles back on itself. It's a box that's its opened lid connects back to its bottom to get back into the box. And that sounds self-reflexive and paradoxical, but that's actually how true philosophical thought and reason is. And your incredible force of thought, Ron, I think is forcing that paradox, because you're starting off by saying, well, we can't be in any box, they're always temporary, but we inevitably have to get back into a box, which means we can't get out of a box. So you're actually saying two things at once, and they're both true simultaneously. And that's what speculative thought is to Hegel anyway. That's the truer circularity rather than the false pictorial circularity that we think is wrong. So does that mean we can have any real knowledge? I think you hit this on the head with Plato, where, you know, it's not really the things themselves that we're knowing, it's the lens of the faculties that we're using to interpret it. And that's also what Hegel calls pure thought thinking itself, which is what we're doing, but we're doing it badly in the beginning. So we have to return to this universal kind, which is this lens thought by itself in its right order, where the boxes are in that circularity, where we're not bringing in anything. And in order to do that, I guess to sort of finish maybe kind of quickly, is in order to do that, you have to start with this concept of negating everything you know to get to that blank slate that you talked about, which means even getting rid of your own bias, that thought is dependent on finite human consciousness or the finite ego. And Descartes couldn't even do this movement. It was so hard, but I think Hegel did it right. I think the first true cause, which causes itself, the causa sui of Spinoza, really is the sheer immediate indeterminacy, which is the spontaneous becoming of itself in an absolute kind of logic. That doesn't mean you have to assume a God. It's actually the opposite. You said the only people who can start this way is people who believe in religion, but that's not true anymore. Hegel did it the truly scientific way, and it's truly new. In fact, I think it's so new that it could probably break out of the boxes of all current pictorial knowledge. It could win all 6 Nobel Prizes simultaneously, the Field Prize. All the limits of current knowledge, I think, can be surpassed by this kind of dialectical knowledge. And it requires thinking in the way you pointed. Ron, I really think that it can't really be in necessarily a totalitarian way. The individual has to think it for themselves. Hegel was not a totalitarian. That was somebody else's box being put on him, but he was far greater than those boxes. So I mean, our words can be objective. That's the weird thing here. Whereas we found for the first time a true foundational beginning that doesn't infinitely regress. It's the true beginning which circles back on its own self and grounds itself in a scientific, systematic way. But we have to get to this breaking out of boxes that aren't arbitrary, but follow this inner spontaneous logic that we're really bad at. And that can happen in 3 different modes. It can happen as a first cause creating itself. It can happen in the mode of art. Art was mentioned earlier. Psychics kind of do this, I guess, if you believe in psychics. It's like they know, but they don't know how they know. Well, that's that spontaneous inner knowledge coming forward. In the artistic mode, where they're channeling it, the frame, the unlimited frame, reconstitutes itself by forming itself outside as its own existence to then return to itself. And then religion is just the representational mode of this, it's reflection. And then philosophy, though, is different because it is the certain knowledge of this process as a return to itself in that circle as universal wisdom. It's the iconoclast breaking out of the iconoclast box into the universal domain of truth for the first time. I think that this could truly transform philosophy. Instead of just describing the world, it's supposed to somehow change it. But that requires us to know ourselves and our knowledge and our limits of our knowledge and transcend those in this way. So I hope that's useful, but Ron, fantastic topic. Thank you for letting me talk at length, and I hope that's useful.
Thank you very much. Interesting. Agustin, at last.
At last, at last, thank you. Thank you. Right, so I've written my arguments so I don't miss anything. It's gonna be brief. I think it's gonna be brief. Very interesting. This is a very interesting talk. Thank you, Ron. And I've heard all the comments. Thank you so much. They were so interesting. So my point on thinking outside the box. Well, I've read recently a great paper by Quentin Skinner. Titled Meaning and Understanding in the History of Ideas. Highly recommendable, highly recommended. Quentin Skinner there poses the question of how should we understand philosophical text, what will be the best way? And his conclusion is that what we have to do is analyze the intention of the authors, find out with what intention they wrote the book, they wrote the philosophical work. And I want to apply that methodology to thinking outside the box. I want to apply to the methodology. I want to think, okay, someone is telling me this buzzword. Oh, think outside the box. Then, okay, what's your intention with that sentence? And before I carry on with the argument, experiment, I reply to you. Quentin Skinner in that text has an argument against the totalitarianism in Plato, which is in the line of thought of the totalitarianism in Hegel. So posing that Hegel will not be totalitarian. So that will be very interesting to read. So back to the idea. So someone tells me, you should think outside the box. Okay. I interpreted the intention of that person telling me that I am thinking inside a box. That person believes I am caged in my own thoughts and that my thoughts are rigid. They are dogmatic, they are rectangular shape, no? Because they are the box shape. And they are all inside and there are no more thoughts, so they are very limited. And they are contained in this kind of like metaphorical box. I cannot think outside of it. I cannot think anything else. Just the things that I already have in my box. And according to them, according to the person who tells me this sentence, the thoughts are not. The thoughts are already outside the box. For those persons who use that metaphorical sentence, no, their thoughts are out of the box. They are free. They are limits. And I definitely believe there is a moral dimension to this. Their thoughts are better and my thoughts are worst because their ones are free and mine are not. I think I find similarities with the idea of Plato's cave. No, Plato seems to, it looked like Plato said in the Republic to everyone, kind of like, think outside the box, or rather think outside the cavern. No? But in the Republic, Plato has like a frame of reference of how to think, how people should think by themselves, how people should move from dogmas and opinion to what according to Plato was real ideas, ideas of truth that will not change, the forms. And at least that looks like saying, think outside the box in the sense of question your own opinions, question everything that can be questioned, which is something that Tony said in the talk, right? That we should question everything. But when people tell me think outside the box, without that kind of frame, without telling me to think for myself, I believe the intention is don't think like in your box, think in mine. Don't think by yourself, think the way I think, or rather, think the way I do. And I think it is more like a seductive way of indoctrination. Think the way I do. Think outside your box, because I want you to think inside mine. So my conclusion will be that we should challenge our own box of thoughts. If I allow the metaphor to be, no? If I allow to consider that we have our own box of thoughts, allowing that metaphor, I say, yes, we should challenge our own box, but we should also challenge whoever tells us to think outside our box, because what they're actually demanding is that think inside their boxes, no? Ron, you started your introduction saying a sentence from Harari that judge people by how their questions, no? I would say that we should judge people by how people question their own dogmas. And I wanted to also reply as well to Claudio, because Claudio said something very interesting about about how probably Hitler and Martin Luther King thought outside their boxes. Well, Ron, you already replied to that, saying that they were already thinking inside their boxes. But particularly, I wanted to mention a book written by Nicholson Baker, Human Smoke. It's a research done by. It's a book where basically Nicholson Baker just gathers news from the time between wars, and it proves that basically Hitler box was huge. Everyone was almost there. Everyone was thinking in very different countries and were putting in writing in the news their thinking, agreeing with those kind of ideas, until those ideas became terribly violent. And then suddenly it was Hitler's box. But before that, that was the common sense, that was the box. So yes, definitely, he was thinking inside the box. That's all, thank you.
Thank you very much. The problem of thinking about your thinking is that the thinking that you're doing is your thinking. You're taking it from inside yourself. I mean,
Yeah,
how do you do that? How do you think within your box that's not your box, because that's the way you are, that's your nature? And I
agree entirely with that counter argument. Yes,
that's
how do
huge,
you
huge problem.
Yes,
and I agree with you about what people are telling you is true. Do you know, if you go into a bookshop, you'll see hundreds upon hundreds of books about self-help,
no?
Yes. So all these people are writing books telling you how you should help yourself, which strikes me as very funny. Hundreds and hundreds of books. The only people who are benefiting from those are the ones that are selling. The authors who are telling you how to think for yourself are the ones who are actually earning from it in all ways, whereas other people don't. And I find that very, very strange and rather funny. But anyway, thank you very much. It is that huge problem, that the recursive thing of saying, look at yourself and look at and you'll find a way. But how do you find a way out of yourself, which is what you're doing? And your point about people who are telling you how to think and how we analyze other philosophers, I think that's a weak point of everybody who analyzes anybody else, a philosopher or a writer or whatever it is, because their intention becomes our intention. Now, to say that a philosopher knows it all bothers me a lot, because no philosopher knew it all. Philosopher is a person who thinks inside his own box. However much we want to believe he doesn't, he does, because there are other people who say there's something wrong with it. And if you think that everybody who says there's something wrong with a certain philosopher is wrong, then you're looking at God. If you believe a philosopher is God, then that's fine. I don't.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you very much. You set me off there. Thank you very much, Boris. At last.
Ron, you said at the beginning you've been doing this for 2.5 years, and I don't think I've missed one of your meetings.
One you did, one.
You see, you're keeping track.
It's written on my wall.
I knew it. But I want to say, first of all, that this is probably let's say the best meeting that you've ever given, but that's mainly because I've forgotten all the others. I've learned a great deal from everybody who's spoken, and there's all sorts of things I've got from all the speakers. When you put up this title of the Thinking Out of the Box, my thoughts actually went to something that I heard as a youth, which was Edward de Bono, who had this thing about lateral thinking. and he came up with the idea that when you have a problem that you don't have to solve, you have to think laterally. I spent years trying to look sideways, and I couldn't see anything that helped me with it. But apparently he had sideways vision. Anyway, this is all very rational. It is lovely to be amongst people who are terribly, terribly rational. Unfortunately, as a dentist, I may put that very clearly at the beginning. I come from the world of dentistry, and that's a very rational world. However, I would say that most of my life is taken up with emotion. And I find the lack of emotion in all this terribly distressing. Augustine, you just talked about somebody who has written about how we should look for the motivation behind some thoughts. And the motivation is another way of saying, look for the hidden parts inside one, the things which are driving us forward and we are not aware of, which are usually based on emotion. And I would say that the changes that I have made in my life, inside myself, have all come out of being more self-aware. That is to say that by using whatever methods one wants to use, psychotherapy or any of the other methods, maybe the LSD or something else will do it too. I've never tried any of those, but psychotherapy was, in my case, it enabled me to see where the limits of my box were. That is, when you're in the box, if you can feel the sides that are holding you in, then you have a chance, perhaps, of finding a way to the box next door. Or some people call it pushing the envelope. It's another weird expression like that. Feeling where the sides are of your box, feeling where the lid is and doesn't let you go up any higher, that requires developing some sort of self-awareness. And when you develop self-awareness or something in that direction, and you find some of the motivation, you begin to explain to yourself some of the motivation for the things that you have previously considered to be absolutely clear and obvious and everybody knows about, except now you realize why you're thinking that way, for the time being, until you find the next bit of motivation which explains even that. It changes you. And somebody earlier on in the discussion said that we never really have a new thought or a new way, some new way of thinking about the world. I don't agree. I think that looking at who we are from the inside, trying to do so, can bring about very, very dramatic changes, and we do become, as it were, different people. And the different person is one with a little more awareness than he had previously. The box really, I think, could also be defined as a comfort zone. It's hard. Somebody also mentioned this towards the beginning of the discussion, that it's a protective way of, I think it was Olga, said something about it being a way to protect ourselves, because it's a bit dangerous moving outside the box. It's a comfort zone. It's a place that's comfortable to be in, and as long as we don't question it, the world seems to be going the way that it ought to go. And when we question it, we find that is not necessarily the case. I just want to end on such a small comment. Somehow or other, in every discussion, I have always tried to raise the subject which is closest to my heart, which is death. And in many religions and many cultures, we end our lives in a box, in which we remain, well, forever. there is no such thing as forever, but you know what I mean. Being a Jew and living in a country where we don't bury in boxes, I know that I will never be put into a box. And it gives me a good feeling to know that I will always be free to mingle with the earth around me. That's about it, really. And thank you so much for inviting me yet again.
I don't know where to begin. Thank you. Thank you very much. The last thing you said, it shouldn't have made us laugh, but it made me laugh, which is ridiculous, which just goes to show. Thank you very much indeed. I'm gonna, if you don't mind, Abraham, I want to get to somebody who has not been on at all, which is Lorna. Are you with us?
I am, and I'm still invisible. How is everybody?
We're all fine. If we could see it would be better, but okay, fair enough.
That's okay. It wouldn't be better. Because I could see myself, and that's not good. Anyway, so I wanted to make, there are a lot of comments that have gone on that I found interesting. First of all, I agree with the last comment about boxes and lids and corners and whatevers, and that boxes are not, a box is not only literally something that is constraining and whatever, but it also has corners and dead ends and points and things like that. So boxes are not only things, I mean, to some extent, to be able to live in a society with so many people, reductionism is necessary because you can't deal with individuals as individuals. And so therefore boxes are a societal definition to some extent, because that's how you process people. That's how, you know, are you Democrat or Republican? Are you, you know, your age, your vocation, et cetera, et cetera. So boxes are useful in terms of categorizing, so to be able to deal with groups of people rather than individuals. Also, the comment about boxes being comforting. I mean, look at cats. They have the whole house to go to. And whenever a box comes, there's all these wonderful cat cartoons about, oh, thanks for the lovely gift. I don't care what it is. I just want the box. And then you've also got, you know, it sort of is this question of, you know, going back to the comment also that was just made about emotional stuff. It is a security thing to stay in your box. And I think a lot about animals and things from Temple Grandin, who was really big into emotional responses to fear and to security, and the fact that, you know, people liked animals, and to some extent people, at least she did something on autistic people, that, you know, they like to be surrounded because it gives you, and for kids, I mean, borders and barriers and limits are necessary to know what you can and can't do. So it's a way to raise young, to introduce them into society and quote proper ways of behaving and etc. and what they do with it later. I also very much enjoyed your excellent singing voice on one of my favorite songs, because I know it from a long time ago. And my dad used to sing it, and his voice wasn't as good as yours. But anyway, the concept that everybody everybody is the same, and, you know, sort of cut out from the same cloth, and everybody wants to be the same, and the conformism of the 50s and I guess till the mid or late 60s. However, I have an issue because I don't like the concept of boxes, and boxes in terms of their being parallelepipeds, which are not standardly found in nature. And so if I need to be contained, I want to be contained in a sphere, because a sphere does not have any corners. And boxes can be any size and spheres can be any size. And I remember the picture, I don't know if it was Leonardo, of the man inside of the sphere, at least inside of the circle. But circles are found in nature. Spheres are found in nature. Atoms are spherical. Molecules are not, because they're combinations of atoms. So to me, I would like to think of a sphere, and spheres can merge, and spheres can deflect. And I'm not thinking of Aristotle's crystal spheres because they were immutable. So anyway, I think that the concept of categorizing people leads to this box idea. But boxes are also inefficient because of the corners, where nothing really happens in the corners of boxes. So anyway, that's where I will stop, except that I did want to say, I spend a lot of time with the concept of frames, but frames are also mutable. You know, if you pick your hands up, one of my yoga instructors puts your hands in front of your eyes, and then you move your head to the side and your frame changes. And if you look out of one eye, your frame is different than if you look out of the other eye. So frames are not necessarily mutable either. And what I like most about it is things that go out of the frame, like a lot of the art where stuff, you don't have the whole picture. It stops in the middle and there's stuff going on. So to me, there's a unlimitability function, and boxes are supposedly trying to constrain that, but the box can just be larger, and a box doesn't have to be restrictive. It can be, you can invite other ideas and other people into your box. So anyway, but I'm still not a box fan. Anyway, that's it.
Thank you very much, Don. I very much like your thing about the cat. That was actually very interesting. Never occurred to me. Thank you. Do you mind if we go on to Anton next? You were in line before. Do I have your permission? Thank you. Anton, you've been very patient. So is everybody.
Yeah, one second. Actually, like, give me 5 minutes so somebody can go before me. I'm about to cross the street right now. So
okay. Be careful. I don't want to be responsible for any broken boxes here. Okay. So in that case, okay. Then in that case, Roland hasn't spoken yet.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I suppose there were a couple of points really. My kind of context for this is probably about how things work or don't work. I was thinking about that expression, thinking outside the box, and when I might use it or when I might hear someone else use it would very often be where something I'm trying to do or something that someone else is trying to do is not succeeding or is not that good for some reason. And the invitation is to find a better result. So, for example, if I was doing something practical and it wasn't working very well, and someone might well say, well, there might be other ways. Have you thought out of the box? So I think I see thinking out of the box, the idea, the metaphor behind it is about changing a method. Whether that's a practical method of something one's doing or a method of thinking, I see it as shifting a method from one state to another. And if I think of it in that term, it makes quite a lot of sense. But the thing I suppose is quite interesting is when one notices it. When do we notice that we need to think out of the box, or that other people are apparently thinking in the box and not out of it? And I think this is, I was trying to think of an exception to this, but I think it is primarily when people are using a method that doesn't seem to be very good. So I would kind of, in my thoughts, simplify the whole thing down to this idea of, well, thinking outside the box involves changing a method so what you're doing works better. That really seems to me to sort of capture quite a lot of the subject. So the next interesting question that I was thinking about was, what is necessary to happen in order to change a method? How do you abandon one way of thinking about something and then allow a new one to appear? And that's a whole different issue, really, isn't it? I think it involves resourcing frustration and resourcing failure. Of course, it's one of the principal areas of education when, for example, children are unable to do something and they make mistakes that they can't get anywhere. Rather than encouraging them to, think harder, there's very often this idea of, well, how can you change the way you're seeing things so you use a different method? So that's, I think, what I'll conclude with that, really. Just possibly just changing the concept slightly to shift from just focusing on thinking to considering the idea of method and how it fits with the purpose one's trying to achieve. Okay.
Thank you very much. Roland, you're saying that it is possible to think outside the box if you find a method for doing so.
What I'm saying is that the way I would define thinking within the box is by having a method that I can't apparently change. In other words, I don't know another way of doing it. And then someone else might come along and go, well, have you tried this? This is a different way of looking at it. And you go, oh yeah, that's not a bad idea. That's a pretty good dodge. And suddenly you're able to do something that you can't do before. And so there you've changed your method. You could, well, at that point, look at the way you were doing it before and go, right, I can see this is thinking outside that box. A bit like on the 9 dots puzzle that was referred to earlier, which I remember seeing years ago in one of Martin Gardner's books, Mathematical Puzzles and Diversions, where he used 9 coins. And the tendency there, of course, is to use a method of trying to join the coins together by staying within the structure of 9 coins. And the trick is to extend the line out of that set of coins so that it's possible to draw a different angle. So basically that involves changing the method that one's using to solve the problem. So I would say if I can equate the notion of the box with a method of doing something, then yeah, I definitely think that we can change a method. And I suppose that metaphorically could be considered to be thinking outside a box. Can we change who we are? In other words, the person who's doing the method, and get outside that? No, we can't. We have our natures, and however we manage to expand into different capabilities, there is basically one is continuously expanding the same boundaries on one level. So there isn't a getting out of the box of self, you could say. There's just an expansion of what that means. But I definitely think it's possible to look at methods and moving on from one method of seeing something or dealing with something to another method and going, well, that's a better method, and it involves a wider context, a different way of looking at that particular problem that leads to a better solution.
Thank you very much, Roland. Thank you. Have you crossed the road, Anton?
Yeah.
You're safe and
I did.
sound, right?
I'm safe now. I said 5 minutes, but I thought about it. Like, it certainly doesn't take 5 minutes, but yeah. It's good to be back since I think there's one or two of these sessions that I missed. And I do appreciate listening to what parts of this I've heard. I came here late, and also while I've been going through the city, there's certain parts that I didn't hear. But I definitely think I understand what Roland was just saying about approach and how you think about things, as well as what occurred to me as I was listening to part of what's being said here, is that maybe a couple of things, and it does tie in with the idea of standing on the shoulders of giants, standing on the shoulders of those giants, and it just keeps going on, is the idea that maybe there's infinite boxes, if we think about it in a broader sense, which in an odd way could be what Spirit Man was talking about an infinite cycle or circle, but I don't know if that's the same thing. So when I say there's a couple of things, I'm thinking about these very broad concepts. It's maybe there are infinite boxes, whether it's related to art, whether it's related to philosophy, whether it's related to politics, etc. And the more open-minded a person becomes, the more expansive the box. So the box still has its confines, which typically is seen as a negative thing. And I think to the degree that it holds you back, or, that it's dysfunctional or destructive, than it is. But maybe it's the case that everything has a certain level of confines. It's just how confined it is relative to how open you are. So that's the idea of infinite boxes. And if that's the case, then yes, you can't really get out of a box, no matter what frame it is, which isn't bad in and of itself, but, does have its limitation. The other thing, though, and it's not simply just a rebel against the idea of there being a box, as you were saying, Ron, is maybe there is a point of infinity that you can reach. I was thinking about this specifically artistically. Actually, it wasn't this broad, but I was thinking of being an artist that is always unpredictable. Like, could you get to a point where you are, this is very idealistic, but infinitely unpredictable? And I thought, well, I think two things are possible. Maybe that is the case, but maybe there's always, as I'm saying, in this broader context of art or politics or philosophy or whatever, always a larger box or some other box. It's just the size of it, depending on how expansive your mind frame is. So I don't know if I'm communicating that clearly, but these are some thoughts that I have.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Very interesting. Mind how you go there. And then going to have Abraham and then Josh, okay? Abraham.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I try to think and talk outside of the box, as much as I can. I think there are some sayings that people want to hear what they want to hear. People want to see what they want to see. So the question is, when you are exposed to something you don't want to see or you don't want to hear, what would you do? Right? Are you ready? Something like that, right? So I think Maurice's notion of how heart and emotion moves us, and for the sake of our limited human understanding, we use different words like thinking or reasoning, emotion, and the body we can touch, or spirit. So I'd like to expand it a little bit, because when we look at our physical being, even the perception-wise, we see it as first heuristics and then go through approximation in a way and optimize, right? It can happen simultaneously. But there are a lot of things going on. Sometimes we are aware, sometimes we don't know. And so the chain of thought led me was, what's beyond reasoning, emotion, and body? I start my first remark as a movie scene of a man in mental hospital posing as someone who is fishing, right? I thought about that story for a while before. Why that story is humorous? Some people very laugh a lot. This group particularly didn't laugh enough, I would say. Very reasonable people. But some groups like hilarious. And then because that story is touching something uncanny a little, ironical, humorous, paradoxical, and a little mystical. What is normal? What is sanity? Who defines it, right? So we can go many directions, but one of the directions I can go is the concept of being possessed, right? Words are like flowing here and hovering, and my voice and words are touching you, and something touching in you, and it's interacting, right? Almost like a poetry experiment, spiritual experience in a way. So momentarily, we are dancing around, even possessed by this, whether you call it ideas or meme or spirit, we can name differently. Something is going on, or electricity even, right? So if I bring this story, I'm not sure how it would, but I'll just say it, okay? So I wonder how many of you experienced or witnessed people who are possessed. I'm talking about not only shamans and channels, people, not the person psychiatrists can diagnose. Those people are, we call it, that's crazy for the sake of conversation, okay? Not only crazy, but possessed. So where I'm going is, it seems like the think outside of box is happening a lot. I gave you the idea of ideas, spirit, or the stories in a way, but there are some people seem to go through a lot more than that. Some entity enter them, occupy them, talk with them, and that's real. It's not just in Hollywood movie. There are some people who are possessed. Modern science don't know what to do with that, although all the traditions in history at least try to do something about it. So I wrote I wonder some of you read the phrase, on the edge of the limit, there is freedom. So some people can fly, then they will never come back. That's a metaphor. They fly and then they cannot find the path to coming back home. That's how people go crazy, some people. So I think pathological societies, I saw this caricature that this lawnmowers, government, or using these lawnmowers, there is a lawn, head come out, people who think outside of the box, or who can see things as it is, they're cutting the head with this lawnmower. I think if we define this concept of think outside of box in the domain of practicality, mostly science, I would say, that could be amazing. But who is using this? The people, right? Politicians or government or military. What do they do with these ideas? I mean, new novel, think outside about the outcomes. Yeah. Anyhow, that's my thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Abraham. Very, very interesting thoughts. Thank you. Josh, are you still walking? Josh?
I
yes,
am walking. Yes,
goodness me. Oh,
walking and listening and thinking.
I feel so jealous that you're walking enough. Wow. Okay.
Well, I wanted to talk about human nature. What is human nature? Is there such a thing as human nature? So I'm imagining myself sitting in a room. I'm a philosopher and I'm writing in reference to other authors that I've read. And I believe I have ideas that move beyond those other authors. So how have I done this? Is that part of my nature that I've done this? And let's say I continue to elaborate on these ideas over time. So where I begin by perceiving myself to have moved beyond these other ideas, but over time I leave those other authors behind, and now I'm perceiving myself to be moving beyond my own ideas. That I see, I'm thinking in relation to my former self by reading what I've written, and in fact, as soon as I write down what I've written, I've already have a different vantage on it. What is it? What's going on there that allows me to have this conversation with myself, in which I am? It's as if I am my present self and my immediately past self are in different worlds in very subtle ways. I think about this in relation to, say, Jean Piaget had a model of experiencing for an animal or for a human being, in which there's a relationship between assimilation and accommodation. Every moment of time to experience one's world in terms of, sensations of perceptions of vision and audition and such, that we're assimilating aspects of that world. But we cannot assimilate any aspect without at the same time, in some aspect, accommodating what we're perceiving to the changes in that world, because that world, no aspect of that world remains the same from moment to moment. Even if you stare at a dot on a page, every instant it slightly transforms itself in relation to your previous experience of it. So the important thing here is that for Piaget, it's not just that. When we accommodate our experience or to the slight changes that take place from moment to moment in our world, it's an accommodation that takes place among our entire memory. That is, if you think about our understanding of our world as being sort of hierarchical, the most trivial events and the most trivial perceptions are linked up in terms of why they matter to us, to more superordinate frames of reference or schemes. And those schemes are linked up to even more superordinate schemes. And at the top, the most superordinate way in which we look at the world has to do with our core relationships with other people. How we think about ourselves in relation to them, our status in relation to other people, our spiritual values and our philosophical values and our emotive values. So all of that entire complex hierarchical nested schemes within schemes shifts in some small way as a whole every time and every moment of assimilating an aspect of the world to ourselves. So there's a holistic accommodation in some small fashion of who we were. So to put that in other terms, it's never the same self. There is no self-identical self over time. There is a self that can relate back to itself. Is I know, I'm pretty much the same person I am, or used to be. But then when we go over something that we created or a picture of ourselves or look at a movie that we saw a long time ago, we recognize how different we are with respect to who we were. So that's a creative change. And I would argue that takes place even if we don't make the effort to do so, even if we're determined not to change one iota, just to create a box made out of cement and concrete and steel and make it as rigid as possible. We are not going to be the same people from moment to moment, from day to day, from month to month, and certainly not from year to year, even though others may point to us and say that person never changes. They're set in their ways. So I think that's so I want to relate this to, I think Roland was talking about methods. So if you think about it, it's our schemes, those overarching schemes of or worldviews on the basis of which we organize and interpret our world. Those are kind of our methods. So in some subtle fashion, our methods are transforming themselves over time. So in spite of ourselves, outside of ourselves, in a passive as well as an active way, simply it's time that gives us the creativity. Even beyond our deliberate, intentional thinking, it's simply existing in time that allows us to never really be within any kind of a box to begin with. One last point to that. We are, well, I forgot what I was going to say.
No, thank you very much. No, it's very good.
Yeah,
I mean, no, that's, and I was going to say, but you said it, it is time, because there's always a change, but you don't see the change from day to day. If you go and see a child after a year and you say, wow, that child's changed, and the parent will say, really? I don't notice that, because it's the time that's passed that counts. So when you say you look back at yourself, you see somebody else, but if you look back at yourself one day, you wouldn't have noticed the difference. It's that it's the time aspect which you mentioned. It's absolutely essential. And yeah, that's very good. Thank you very much. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Okay, folks, that looks like we had a very short session again, and well done to all of those who are still here. And I very much look forward to seeing you next month. I think it'll be the 9th of April, as far as I remember. I look forward. Oh, but by the way, there's a YouTube where you can see all of the things for the last 2.5 years, including today's, which will come out in a day. So if you're interested, write to me, or I can give it to you now, whatever you want. But anyway, it exists. There's a YouTube channel. So I wish you a good night, or whatever time of the day it is. And I look very, very much looking forward to seeing you again. Thank you very much for all your input. And I'll see you.
Ron, what's the channel?
Oh, it's youtube.com/@ Ronald Green Philosophy. And that will get you, and you'll see the whole hundreds of them.
Ron.
Yeah.
Ron, any chance you could share with us the chat?
Yes.
From,
I can send anybody who wants the chat. I can send that. Anybody who wants it, please contact me. You'll find my email address on the invitation. So whatever you want, you can contact me. I will answer. Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, everybody. I look forward to seeing you next time.